Good morning. This is Pastor Ernie Lewis of the Blue Point Church in Sisney, Illinois, with your thoughts for Friday. Paul continues his prayer to the Colossians in Colossians chapter 1 and verse 10. He says, I pray that you would be strengthened with all might, according to his glorious power, for all patience and long suffering with joy. You know, Paul calls the believers, first of all, to walk worthy of the Lord, and then he calls for them to live lives that were well-pleasing to him. So it is no surprise here that he talks about being strengthened with all might. It's always been a difficult task to live for God in a godless world and society where we are. These Colossians were facing persecution and opposition on every side. And of course, we find it no different in our current circumstances. We have seen political upheaval. We have seen citizen uprisings. We've seen destructive protests in the last year or so. Things that don't look good for the future of America right now either. But things were not good in the Roman Empire back then for Christians. Some were being fed to the lions for sport. Others were suffering silently in their own communities where the authorities oppressed them daily. And Paul says, in order to walk worthy and live pleasing lives for God, I pray that you will be strengthened with all might. We need God's strength to be true to his word, to live as he directs us to. We need God's strength to be overcomers in this godless society. But we really need God's strength to do what he has called us to do. We're to live holy lives. We're to bear witness of the gospel in our communities and in our families. And Paul tells us we will have the strength to do so from God because it's according to his glorious power. There is no greater reserve where we could call for power. You know, we like to cry, woe is me, when the God of heaven is actually giving us the strength and the power to be overcomers of whatever we're facing. Paul reminds these believers that his prayer for strength and power are for believers to have all patience. Patience in this passage actually means perseverance, which means that we will have the determination to stand for God despite what the rest of the world is doing or despite what the rest of the world thinks about us or what they're doing against us. He mentions our need of long suffering. Long suffering, of course, means to suffer long. And the idea of long suffering and living for God in this world, we really haven't suffered much, to tell you the truth. Oh, I realize that we were looking at the TV and we're watching the news and we're troubled. But when you see Christian martyrs worldwide today, we have not suffered that much. But to be long suffering means that we can suffer long, but we will also be forgiving and patient and trusting the Lord in all these things. And he ends the verse with this phrase, long suffering with joy. Now, I love that picture there. Having the inner peace that God isn't finished working, that God isn't finished with you yet. God wants to do something tremendous, even in the midst of trouble and turmoil. He wants you to have his strength and power so that you can live with patience, long suffering, and joy for him.